Hope everyone had a good day in the market today. It is time for the TrendSpider Chart Roundup. I'm going to bring on Jake Wujastyk, the co-founder of TrendSpider. Jake, before I let you say anything, don't say anything. Before I let you say anything, I got something I want to tell you real fast.
All right.
And that something is... I had the banner and I had the whole thing queued up. I was delayed on the GIF there, or is it?
Hey, thank you.
I never know.
That's awesome. I really appreciate it.
Happy birthday, sir!
Thank you.
Mid-May, I should say, is a great time for birthdays.
It is.
Speaking from experience.
Are you a May baby too?
I'm a May 15th baby, actually.
Hey, happy belated birthday to you.
Thank you. Everyone in chat, there we go. Happy birthday. Smash the like for birthdays. We all love them. They're the best kind of days. We could spend the whole show talking about birthdays, but we're not going to do that. We're going to talk about some stocks and charts. I'm going to let Jake bring on his charts here and have him walk you through. Let's get Neil Patrick Harris off the screen there. Bring on TrendSpider's platform. And Jake, what's on your radar today, man?
Well, definitely a weird day. We started off pretty strong. The only thing that was a little bit of a red flag was the fact that SPY wasn't really participating with some of these moves. And, as always, really just looking at the overall broad markets and kind of that top-down approach is what I'm focused on. And so that's why, going into the first chart, we're going to just look at SPY and see kind of what happened today. Now, it's something that we talk about quite often, the anchored volume by price. This is just the ability to look at the volume as a function of price rather than a function of time. When I say a function of time, I mean, you've got your volume bars at the bottom measuring each day and how much volume occurred on each day. In this case, we're looking at each volume node represents a price level. And you can see here since the March lows, and that's where you really want to anchor these things from, these pivot points, these reversals. Since the March lows here, we have a ton of shares holding right in this 413 to 417 area. So what happened was we broke down last week. We tried to move right back up, but what happened is we ran into this huge supply zone here. So anytime the price is below this volume shelf is what I like to call it, you have a lot of people break even selling. And what does that mean? It means that you bought at 416, you deal with a drawdown to 404 like we saw last week, you get back to break even and you get out. And that adds supply onto the market. And that's exactly where we really rejected or we were rejected today. And really the last couple of days, we haven't been able to get through this area. Now, we did finally break through this gap here. So we barely didn't fill it. It's almost too close to call, but we did fill this gap below that we had the gap up from Friday. So we are starting to fill some gaps. We still do have this gap below, and all I'm doing here is I'm just using the automated gap detection on TrendSpider to kind of see these areas. So we did fill the one today. Remember, if you do ever want to know when a gap fills, you can just create an alert on any of these gaps, and it will automatically send you an email or a text message. So this would have definitely been a day where you got one of those text messages that the gap filled below. Now, the question is, do we continue down and fill this gap way down in the 400 area, which is also a psychological level below, that will just naturally be an area where people are like, well, I remember when it broke out here. So when it gets back down to this area, it becomes just a psychological level that people remember. So we'll have to see if that does fill. But for now, we are having trouble getting through the supply zone. One thing that I'll also mention here is the seasonality. Tuesday is technically the worst performing day of the year. So what I mean by that is, this 35% here that you see means that 35% of the time Tuesday closes green versus Monday. So you could also look at this and say 65% of the time Tuesday closes red versus Monday's close. So historically speaking, Tuesday seasonality is right in line with what we saw today. A very red candle here. Tuesday is right in line with that. Now, yesterday we also had a red candle, so that added to a loss on the Monday statistic here, but notice what happens into the rest of the week. The second half of the week is definitely stronger than the first half of the week for SPY, the Qs as well. Actually, let me reverse that. I think the Qs actually have the worst day of the week on Wednesdays. Close. Tuesday is the worst, but Wednesday is pretty close as well, 37% win rate. And you'll see that across the board on a lot of tech names. A lot of these tech names have really bad seasonality on Wednesday this year for some reason. So definitely keep that in mind when you are looking at the charts. It's always nice to look at the seasonality side of things as well. So you're not just looking at one perspective, you're looking at multiple perspectives. In this case, we're just looking back since the benchmark of 2021, the start of it. And so notice too here, Thursday and Friday have a 63 and 67% win rate. So definitely the markets have a stronger end to the week than they generally do at the beginning of the week. And same thing with the Qs. I mean, this is definitely nowhere near all-time highs like SPY is. So definitely keep that in mind. We did fill this gap from May 4th back on May 7th. So we really don't even have any gaps above. We still do have this gap below that we were talking about in the last session last week. So will that fill? We'll have to see. We have a ton of volume holding down here. So that's something to consider as well. Just not a lot of, there's not a lot of liquidity above, but there is below. So when I say liquidity above, I mean these areas here where there's not a lot of volume. So I'm highlighting this in orange. You can see there's not a lot of volume blocks or volume nodes here. But when we get down here, we are starting to get in an area where a lot of people have bought shares here. A lot of shares have been transacted down here. So it's going to be harder for the price to get down through this area because once everybody's back to break even from the March lows, they're less likely to sell. The reason why the price is able to drop quickly before you get to one of these volume shelves is because everybody has profit. They start selling, they add supply onto the market. Then once we get back down to this green shaded area, that's when we generally get a bounce. You can see that happened last week on May 12th and the 13th. So we'll have to see if this area holds going into the rest of the week. One thing that I'll mention here on the the month of the year seasonality, if we go back since the January bottom, you'll see here that, May, historically speaking, is slightly higher than normal. So that means 67% means a 67% win rate. Now, one thing I will do is exclude 2021. It's actually 80%. So the reason why the statistic just changed here is because technically right now we are down for the month for the Qs. I think we are actually. Are we? Yeah, we're definitely down for the month for the Qs. So one thing to keep in mind is, if you don't exclude 2021, the system is going to think that this current May is a down month and will actually add that to the seasonality. So this is looking at the seasonality excluding the current month. So 80% win rate, that's generally a pretty strong month, and we're not seeing that. So that's definitely something to consider. Now, one thing that's really interesting, and another thing that kind of explains some of the weird price action last week, if you go to the week of the year and you go since 2016, since the bottom, let me expand this. You'll see that the 20th week of the year, for whatever reason, I don't even know how to explain this, has a 0% win rate. That means the 20th week of the year, which was last week, never closes higher than the 19th week of the year. So last week was clearly quite a red week. So being able to look at this and say, well, this was right in line with, expectations, you can really get an idea of seasonality here. Now, so far, the start of the week's been a little weird. Technically, this has an 80% win rate for the 21st week of the year. But this is starting to get pretty granular. But over time, if you do more, let's say you look back since maybe 2010, you will see that these numbers kind of normalize a little bit. But still, there are some discrepancies with bigger, larger percent wins than other weeks of the year. So definitely something to keep in mind going into this week, the rest of the week, that historically speaking, it is a pretty strong time of the year from a week by week basis. Now going into IWM, just looking at the small caps, something interesting here that I found earlier. So let's just widen the screen here a little bit. So one, if we start the volume by price, let's say from the swing high here, you'll see that we did run into quite a bit of supply here. So not really shocking to see the price pull back a little bit. Now, one thing I will mention, and let's just turn off the volume by price overall and look at the raindrop chart. We actually had quite a bit of volume at the top of the range today. So this is something I look for anytime we have a wick like we had today. So you can see here the raindrop on the left, and we'll just put the hollow candle here, just a regular candle on the right. And what you'll notice here is if I point an arrow to the top of this wick, this raindrop is the same thing as this candle. It's the same day. We're just looking at the raindrop version of this candle. For those that are not familiar with the raindrop chart allows you to see where the volume is taking place. Where is that supply being absorbed within the days range or within the 30-minute candles range? So in this case, you'll see, even though we did have a pretty strong close to the downside, you'll see that quite a bit of that volume is actually in the wick. So anytime that happens, it definitely makes me kind of wonder, is this really strong selling, or, is this a little bit of a discrepancy? So that's something I'll be paying attention to into tomorrow, the fact that we did have quite a bit of that volume taking place at the top of the range. The fact that the volume took place at the top of the range tells me that there was somebody willing to absorb that supply that was being dumped on the market. If there wasn't demand there to absorb that supply, the price would have had to drop in order to find buyers for that supply that was being offered on the market. So anytime you see a wick like this, you see volume in the wick, it's worth noting. So definitely, if you haven't tried out raindrops before, give them a shot, and always split the screen and look at the hollow candle or the regular candle, whatever candle you're using, and look at the raindrop. A lot of the time, one thing that's really interesting is if you have, let's say, a red candle and a green raindrop, that's also something to consider. I generally am giving the raindrop a little more priority. Now, this doesn't always work. Last week was a great example of that. Looked like we were going to have a really strong rest of the week when we did this last week, and we did have a red candle here. So yeah, we had this red candle here on the 11th, and we had a green raindrop, and we continued down the next day. So this is not something that's an end all be all. This isn't, this is the key to the markets. This is just another variable you can use in your analysis. And like anything in the market, it's not going to be 100% right 100% of the time. But it is a great perspective into the markets to just get an idea of what's going on within these candles. So for IWM, definitely keep in mind that we did have some buyers absorbing supply at the top of the range. That's definitely something to keep in mind for small caps. Let's look at the VIX, and the VIX is definitely one to start keeping an eye on. Why? Because VIX, for whatever reason, the month of June is actually pretty strong for the VIX. So if we go to that seasonality again and we look at the month of the year, since we can look at since even 2010, you can see here that June has an 82% win rate over the last 10 years. So for whatever reason, June and August have very high win rates for VIX. And remember, 82% win rate means that 82% of the time VIX closes green versus May's close. So, if we look at the monthly side of things, you will see here that, we are very close to the same area that we got a bounce in 2010 after the 2008 meltdown, and then the VIX melted down after that. So we're technically in the same spot. We have June seasonality really upticking here for the VIX. So that's definitely something to consider if you're ultra bullish in the markets. Definitely keep that in mind going into the first true month of summer here. So the VIX is definitely one that we'll have to keep an eye on. And then, just in general, we'll take a quick look at the crypto names, Bitcoin. The fact that Bitcoin is really, having some trouble here definitely is a little concerning, because honestly, at this point, I look at the VIX as more of a general, it gives me a general idea of risk on versus risk off in the market compared to even, the VIX at this point. So anytime Bitcoin's starting to break down, that's definitely worth noting. Now, one thing that I did find last week or the week before was the RSI. And let me change this to the 12. So I'm using a 12 RSI because there's 12 months in a year. I want to look back pretty much a year RSI. You'll see here that we do have some pretty strong negative divergence here. You'll see here that we've got these higher highs from 2017 to 2020, 2021 at this point. And then we've got these lower highs here on the RSI. So this is negative divergence. You definitely can see this looking very similar to 2017. You've got this big drop in the RSI on the monthly side of things. You got that same exact drop here on this month's RSI, and just in general, not great. And we actually talked about this going into the summer months. Crypto is not incredibly strong. The price action is generally more on the downside than it is the upside. You can easily go in and check that on the seasonality side of things. Ethereum's the same way. But if we go into a little more of a detailed view here, you'll see that we did start breaking down through a pretty important level here. So if we anchor the volume by price from the January lows, here, we kind of broke down through some pretty important levels. One, we broke down through this volume shelf that was really acting as quite a support zone for the price back here in late April. And then once again here on this huge, what everyone will probably call the Elon Musk crash. And if we anchor a VWAP, just looking at the volume weighted average price from this pivot, we also broke down through this. And that's definitely something to consider. The fact that we are starting to break down through these levels, and we'll just have to see what happens into the next couple of weeks. If we look at the weekly chart, we already broke down really through this pretty crucial area. So if you look at the fibs here, look at the measured move, we literally just could not get through this 5.618 extension from the 2019 down to the 2020 measured move. And we are starting to break down through this ascending triangle. And so last week was kind of the nail in the coffin. And now you can see we are starting to continue down this week. Plenty of time left in the week, though, so we can't really come to any conclusions quite yet on a Tuesday when this still has a lot of time to form. So Bitcoin breaking down, I mean, you know, it is what it is. That's what it's just breaking down from a technical perspective. Ethereum actually did not get up to this 3.618 extension. So that's something to keep in mind. I think a lot of people thought this was going to get to 5K. Still could. You can see the weekly candle is starting to show a little bit of a wick here. Now, if we look at the daily chart, you can see here that if we anchor the volume by price from this swing low here, you'll see that here's your little capitulation before the next leg up. We are trading right at this volume shelf here. So, we'll have to see how this plays out. Now, remember, we've got this wick. What do we want to do? Anytime we see a wick like this, turn on the raindrop chart and see what's going on within this wick. So if we go to the raindrop chart, you'll see here that there's not a ton of volume within this wick. On top of that, you can see that we have a red raindrop versus a green or hollow candle. So anytime you have a hollow candle, it just means your open is higher than your close. Anytime it's this white color, it just depends on what background you're using. In my case, this is white because the background's white. But anytime you have a hollow candle like this, it is showing that buyers are in control from the open. But if you look at the raindrop, it's definitely worth noting that this is a red raindrop. As I mentioned, it's not an end-all be-all, but there is definitely some divergence that you can kind of get an idea of what's going on there. And going into the week of the day of the week seasonality since the beginning of this year, you'll see here that we kind of have this declining win rate as the week progresses over the course of the week. I mean, Monday is the best performing day so far in 2021. You can see Sunday there's a slight uptick, but definitely declining seasonality as we enter the rest of the week. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. Obviously, these are still above 50%, so that shows just how strong this year has been. But this can always change. The market trades in cycles. Price action changes over time. So we'll have to see if maybe this little bit of a flag, if you want to call it that, does break out from here. and we'll just have to kind of play it by ear. Now, the next one is Litecoin. I don't think we've touched on Litecoin too much over the last couple sessions that we've done, but Litecoin is one that's really interesting because we do have quite a bit of volume at the top of the range on Litecoin. Same type of setup here where we do have kind of this flag, if you want to call it a flag. It's kind of a little overextended for a flag, but same thing. You kind of have this coiling action here, this consolidation to the downside, possibly moving to the upside. We'll have to see. But if we turn on the hollow candle here, you'll see we've got this wick. But within Litecoin, a lot of that volume is at the top of the wick. So Litecoin, I would say, is looking a lot better than Ethereum, at least at this point. There's still time left in the day. So let me check the chat here, see if there's any questions. Let's go to the live chat. Okay. Oh, thank you, everybody, for the happy birthdays. I'm waiting for rotation back to value, from value to the Qs. What should we be looking for as the trigger? I mean, I would just look at the chart and seasonality. I mean, the Qs and SPY, I mean, with the VIX really spiking in June, I don't know if we're there yet. I would definitely look at July. July is historically a very strong time of the year for the Qs, for SPY. So definitely keep that in mind. Dave, China cracks down on crypto business, saying speculative trading seriously infringing on financial order. I mean, I don't really disagree with that statement. I mean, some of these coins are just getting out of control. You have very blatant pump and dumps happening, and that just doesn't fly in the financial markets with stocks, equities, all that. So I don't see that flying with crypto as this whole sector and industry matures. X-Ray Zap, this title of this news event you sent, I mean, definitely makes sense. Let's see. Now, we went over crypto. Let's go over one more crypto. Doge. I mean, at this point, Doge is such a big market cap. It's hard to even say this is a pump and dump at this point, just because there's so much money flowing into it. But I mean, this thing's still stair-stepping. I would definitely keep an eye on the fact that we are getting back into this area where we just don't have a lot of liquidity here. So if we anchor the volume by price from this highest close here on April 18th before we reverse to around 16 cents, you can see there's just not a lot of volume down here. So if the price starts to drop through this area, it can drop very quickly. We already saw it with Bitcoin a couple, I was going to say days ago, but I think it was maybe five-ish days ago. So, definitely something to keep in mind. Now, someone just brought up Riot. Riot is essentially just a proxy for crypto. We'll have to see if if this is just a bounce because it's oversold, or if this is kind of a meaningful bounce here. But it's down quite a bit. I mean, we're on log scale, so it doesn't look that down, but it's down 68% or so over the last 2 or 3 months. So Riot, definitely one a lot of people like to trade. I think Riot is actually right near where I live. Their office is down in Castle Rock, Colorado, which I heard is less than impressive. But a lot of people are trading these stocks not because they care about the company or what it does. They just are trading the price action. And if that's you, that's awesome. Now, one thing I'll mention here is if we anchor the volume by price from the swing high, you'll see here if we do start to move to the upside, we don't have a lot of liquidity above. So it works the same way as we were just talking about Dogecoin. We highlight this orange. There's not a lot of liquidity up here. So there's not a lot of people that are going to be back to break even after dealing with the drawdown until we get up to around 36, all the way up to around 40. So if this does start to take off, think of this zone as kind of a vacuum for price, right around starting around 26.50 all the way up to around 35.50, 36. And then going into, Wednesday, slight uptick in the seasonality with the 53% win rate, but, nothing too crazy there. Can we look at Emax? Sure. Not even, what is Emax? I don't have that on the system. Emax USD. I'm not sure what Emax is. If it's a different symbol, I can try to look it up. But one thing I definitely wanted to touch on was growth names. So growth names are finally starting to come back.
Jake, Emax is a brand new crypto.
Oh, is it? I don't think we have it yet.
Yeah, no.
Okay, got it. So Shiba coin. We can look at Shiba coin real quick. It's hard for me to even look at charts that are thousandths of a penny, but let's look a little more at the 1 hour chart just because we have a little more price action to look at. I mean, honestly, Shiba coin, as much as this coin just blows my mind that this is even a thing, there is quite a bit of price action suggesting kind of this inverse head and shoulders forming. So here's your left shoulder, here's your head, here's your right shoulder type of deal. So we'll have to see if that actually plays out. But I don't really have any bias on Shiba coin. I don't trade it. I don't think I ever would. But from this point perspective, it actually looks pretty strong if you're just looking at straight up price action and patterns here with this inverse head and shoulders. And then you can see that Tuesday so far in 2021, which isn't much time because this has only been around since 420 or 421. There's not a lot of data to go off of. So Tuesday is historically the strongest week of the day of the week, but that's over like 3 weeks. So I wouldn't really look at the seasonality too much on this one. So we'll have to see, if this does follow through. Can you define a wall? XPEV. I'm assuming you're talking about the volume shelf for the wall, like a level above where a lot of people would be breaking even. So if we anchor from this swing high here from January, I think Santo, you're kind of talking about this area here. This supply zone above would start around $30 and then go all the way up to around 33. And this is something a lot of these growth names have kind of had to deal with. I mean, if you look at XPEV, hasn't gotten there yet. If we anchor a VWAP from the swing high here, you'll see that this is almost right in line with the bottom of this wall, this shelf. So $30 and let's say 25 cents would be a very hard level to get through. And if it does, that would definitely show some interesting strength for this particular name. Now, Fubo is one that we're already there. So if we look at this chart here, anchoring the volume by price from the swing high, you'll see that we literally are having trouble getting through this this supply zone above. So this is what you'd kind of be able to expect on something like XPEV, where it's probably going to take a few days for the price the market to digest some of the supply. And one thing to always keep in mind, anytime you have a wick like this and you gap up into the wick, that's a pretty strong kind of definitely a message showing that there's definitely buyers in control. So anytime you get a gap up into a wick or a gap down into a wick, that shows some pretty strong strength. So if we do get through this area on Fubo, I mean, we could really take off. I think Fubo could easily get back to the 30s here. And it's just one of those names it's been so beaten down. I mean, it was at 50, 55 literally 3 months ago. So this is one of those names that's right at the shelf. If we look at PLTR, this is one that hasn't really made it to that shelf yet. So if we anchor from the swing high here, you'll see that this supply zone above for PLTR is right around, let's say 22.75 up to around 24. So if we highlight that in red, this is kind of your supply zone above. So if we continue up, this would definitely be an area where the price could get rejected. We'll have to see what happens. Now, one thing to keep in mind with a lot of these names, PLTR, for example, only a 26% win rate for Wednesday. So Wednesday is definitely the worst performing day of the week for PLTR. A number of stocks are like this. I think AMD, NVIDIA, a lot of these names just Wednesday has not been a top performing day for some of these names. So one thing that I will also mention here, going into Snowflake, this is a really interesting case study going back to last week. We were talking about where Snowflake was trading last week, and we were looking at the weekly Bollinger Band here. So if we remove this seasonality, let's get rid of this volume by price. You'll see something really interesting. Notice where Snowflake finally bounced. It bounced right at this lower weekly Bollinger Band. So what this is this is the daily price with the weekly Bollinger Bands overlaid on top. So if we were to possibly continue up on Snowflake, this Bollinger Band, this 20-week SMA above would be an area to watch. But definitely wanted to point out the fact that Snowflake bounced right off of this this weekly lower Bollinger Band, kind of right in line with what we were looking at last week. And this is another one where if you go and you anchor the volume by price from the swing high, we are starting to get right to that supply zone above. So, Snowflake is really going to have some trouble getting through, let's say, around 232, 235, if we could get there. So, that's something to keep in mind. Always want to anchor the VWAP from this area as well. You'll see that that's right in line, right around 233. So right between 232, 35. So this is definitely the area to get through. Look at how many times Snowflake has not been able to break through this swing high anchored VWAP. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and we've tested that a couple times on some of these individual touches. So that is really going to be the area to get through for Snowflake. If we can't get above this anchored VWAP, that's going to be an issue, and we'll have to see what happens. Now, it's May 18th. We still have quite a bit of time left in the month, but some of these monthly candles are starting to show some pretty interesting wicks here. But you really can't look too deep into what's going on because there's still 2 weeks left of price action to kind of form this candle. So not something to get too excited about yet, but some of these names, Fubo, Snowflake, a lot of these names are showing some interesting monthly candles forming here. Another one that we can go over is FSLY. FSLY's monthly candle is not attractive right now, but one thing I'll mention here is on the daily chart, we do have quite a volume gap above. So, we were just talking about these areas where there's just not a lot of liquidity above. This is definitely one of them. You have the price gap, but you also have the volume gap above. So this is a contender possibly for a very strong move through this area. And you really don't have a lot of volume holding until you get to around, let's say, 68 to 70, which seems like a dream at this point. But this would be an area above where price could move up to if there's just not a lot of liquidity above, which is shown simply by this highlighted orange area here. So price gaps are one thing. Volume gaps act pretty similar to price gaps. You just don't have a lot of volume holding in this area. And so we could see a pretty strong move off of this volume shelf here highlighted in green. We also, as I mentioned, have this price gap. So you just turn on the gap snake here. You'll see that this gap's above. If you wanted to be alerted anytime this gap starts to fill, you just right click, create an alert at this line. So next time the price gets anywhere close to this bottom of this gap, or you simply want to know right when the price breaks through this gap to the upside, just click breakthrough, move your sensitivity all the way to the left, and you'll see here that you will get an alert anytime that daily price action closes through this line. If you are using alerts on TrendSpider, make sure to lower this to the lowest time frame. So now the 10-minute confirmation candle means that whenever the 10-minute candle closes through this line, you'll be alerted. You don't have to wait until the daily candle closes to get the alert that the price action is breaking through this area. So all in all, quite a few gaps above. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 gaps above to fill. Now, FSLY also does have a gap below. So, when you're looking at gaps, always look to see if there's any below as well. We also have this one down here around 23. So if this does start to break down, that gap below around, let's say 23.50 all the way up to around 27 would be a potential target below if this continues down. So that is Fastly. Tesla's another one that we're starting to get pretty close to potentially, a bigger breakdown here. One thing that I'll mention, if you look at the 200-day simple moving average, you'll be able to see pretty quickly that we are starting to kind of break down through this area. So if you look at the last time that we tested this area, we bounced off of it immediately. So you can see here back in March of 2020, we literally closed below and sprung right back up and didn't get anywhere near it again. This time, we're starting to kind of trade right at it, and we're actually trading below it. So you can see here that the 200-day simple moving average is now acting as resistance. Previously, it was kind of acting as potentially a bounce area, but you can see here there's been 2 days in a row that we've closed below this SMA now. So definitely something to keep in mind. One thing I will mention as well, the weekly Bollinger Bands are looking quite interesting here. So if you look at the weekly Bollinger Bands, let's remove this alert, you'll see something pretty interesting. So last time that the price really started to kind of break down was when we had this area that we started testing below. So in this case, that is the lower weekly Bollinger Band here. And this started happening back in March of 2019. And you can see the price had these small dead cat bounces, but continued to move down and trade right along this lower Bollinger Band on the weekly chart. So the fact that we have not traded anywhere near this Bollinger Band until now is something to consider. We are starting to get close to the lower part of that band. And who knows, we could do something like this into the next couple months. So 1, 2, kind of same exact price action that we saw previously. So if we move that over, it looks pretty similar to what we saw there. So just kind of lower highs, lower lows, and that's pretty much the definition of a downtrend. So we'll have to see if that plays out. There are quite a few gaps below in Tesla. I know there's a lot of Tesla maximalists out there, but you can't ignore price action. You have to look and see what's going on, and kind of take it from there. Roku, let's take a look at Roku here. So Roku hasn't done a ton. I mean, Roku's another one of those ones where if we go to the anchored volume by price, start from the swing high here, we are starting to get into this area where there's not a lot of liquidity above. It's pretty much the case everywhere. We're just starting to move up into this area where we've got these supply zones 7 to 10% above. So Roku is definitely a contender to move up. Roku's also one that has this wick. So what do we do when we have this wick? Turn on the raindrops, see what happened in today's wick. Was there volume in that wick? In this case, yes, there was very concentrated volume in this wick. So that is something I would definitely keep in mind. You can even see here that we are starting to kind of break through this this resistance line, and this is what I love to call a balloon breakout. So you can see here that we do have most of the volume, this volume profile above resistance. You've got this really nice breakout here, volume backing the breakout. And that is a very strong setup. Anytime that you see that wick with that much concentrated volume in it, that is a very strong sign. So the fact that Roku held pretty well with this weird market today seems like it's got some relative strength into the rest of the week. So here, if we just do an arrow, you'll see here that within this wick, you've got quite a bit of volume. So this is about as textbook of a balloon breakout as you're going to get. Why do we call it a balloon breakout? Well, if you look here, it looks pretty similar to a balloon. You've got the top here. That's kind of your balloon, this volume at the top of the range. You really don't have any volume down here. So that's kind of your balloon string. And so that's where we kind of created the name balloon raindrop, because that's just exactly what it looks like. So yes, Roku's looking very strong, and we do have that gap above until, let's say, around 355 or so. And when I say gap, I mean the volume gap, not an actual price gap. Next one, we had a request. Hex. I'm assuming that's a crypto. 5-cent crypto. Yeah, I mean, most of these cryptos are looking pretty similar. So, you topped out. We're starting to kind of roll over here. This is a 5-cent crypto. So, it's when you start getting this low in price and it doesn't look like there's a ton of liquidity here, that's when it becomes an issue. There's any other stocks you guys want to see? We've got about 5 to 8 more minutes, so we can take a look at some of these individual names if you guys want to check them out. If not, we'll jump into another interesting growth name, SKLZ. This is another one that's really having trouble kind of initially getting through some of this supply. So you can see here, just a lot of supply above that SKLZ is going to have to get through to, to get going. DK
I have a question for you, Jake. I have a request, if I may. Disney, please.
Disney.
Yeah, this is one. Full disclosure, I added more. I added more yesterday, and I want to know if that was a gigantic mistake.
Oh wow, I didn't realize it. It was in the 160s. So yeah, let's look at the monthly. The monthly is definitely kind of rolling over here. If we start the volume by price from this capitulation point, you'll see that we are kind of breaking down through this smaller volume node here, and you've just got this huge liquidity gap. So when you have this big of a gap like that, you can't just go straight down. Well, technically you could. I mean, anything's possible, but you're generally not going to just go straight down to this next area. So I like to anchor the VWAP from this area too. And you'll notice that the VWAP from the COVID crash is also around, let's say 135. So on the monthly side of things, not a lot of liquidity below. You have a lot of shares that are holding from around 117 all the way to 122, 123. So imagine that you bought Disney way back there. You see the price action breaking down. You have almost a 40% profit right now. So as the price starts dropping, you're probably more likely inclined to take some profits. That adds supply onto the market. That's how you get some of these moves down. So the volume by price just shows you kind of how much profit are these shares holding at. And that gives you a better idea of, what's kind of going on. So monthly, definitely not the strongest candle. We still have time though. On the monthly chart. If we look at the daily, this is when it gets a little interesting. You do have quite a few gaps below. I don't believe that every gap fills, but I know a lot of them do. So if we were to look at the gaps, we do have gaps to the upside as well. We have one from last week around 175. We have another one around 183. But then you can see we've got these bigger gaps from the earnings moves to the upside way down here at 128. We have another one here that ends around 155. So, I don't want to be pessimistic on the stock. I don't own it or anything, but you do have, I like to call these gaps below. They kind of look like Swiss cheese. It's kind of the way I look at it is, and I don't know if I used this analogy before on this stream, but if you have a lot of gaps in price, and let's say that you're standing on a porch or a deck, and you've got a bunch of termites eating in those, the
foundation,
the wood that's holding that deck up. You've got these holes, and if you have enough pressure that's pushing down on the deck or weight, eventually that's going to just cause it to collapse. And so, I look at these gaps in price as kind of like these holes in like a beam or a wooden beam essentially holding up a deck or something, where if you got enough holes, you got termites eating into those holes, it's going to fall. So I've seen plenty of times though where gaps just don't fill. I mean, Netflix, Facebook, they have gaps from years ago, but we are rolling over a little bit, and it's definitely something to consider. So let's look at the seasonality though. I'm curious what the seasonality looks like since 2016 here.
So I done goofed is what you're saying. Potentially.
We'll see. Well, look at May. I mean, May historically is not a strong month since 2016. It only has a 17% win rate. Yeah. So just historically speaking, it's not the strongest month of the year. You have a slight uptick in June, and then July is really your strong month. And that's pretty much across the board. July, I don't know if it's like 4th of July ending or happening or whatever, But generally, you see a pretty strong move up after the 4th. So we'll have to see if that happens into this coming summer.
All right, we got a couple more minutes here, and I see a few more tickers in chat. Oh, so Nikola, did you see Nikola today or the last couple of days?
Is that still a thing? Wow,
it is still a thing, and then some.
Well, we have a gap above. Look at that, way up at 16. So price gap above. Not enough data to even look at the seasonality here. But going into tomorrow, we can look at the day of the week seasonality since the beginning of this year. It's been a pretty rough year for NKLA, so not shocking to see not a lot of these days even have over a 50% win rate. But the gap above is something to consider. If we do the same analysis we've been doing on some of these other names, I'm assuming we're probably going to see a supply zone right around that gap. Starting from the swing high. No, wow, there's not. Yeah, so we got through that. So remember, on some of these other names, we were talking about this area, like Fubo, for example. We moved up to this area. It initially is acting as supply for 3 days, but once we get through it, the price can start moving pretty quick. We don't have a lot of shares holding above. We don't have a lot of people saying, "Oh, I got in Nikola, however you say that name, NKLA at $15." And then it gets back to $15 and you get out. You don't have a lot of those participants. You can see that because there's not a lot of shares or volume nodes sticking out. So, I mean, you've got the price gap. You've got this area where you don't have a lot of liquidity above. I mean, crazy enough, yeah, NKLA doesn't look horrible here, which is hilarious to say. But same thing here. Look at this. You've got volume supporting price at the top of the range. NKLA actually looks pretty decent. Let's see. AMC. That is another one that this is actually a great case study on the volume shelf here. So go to hollow candles. So if we anchor the volume by price from really the swing low here, and it doesn't matter, you can anchor it from the swing high, but the reason why I want to anchor it from the swing low is we already know where a lot of shares are likely holding. I mean, look at the range that AMC is traded within this area. So if I measure it from here, I already know that a majority of shares are going to trade within this range because it's a pretty tight range. If we start it down here, we can see, are there shares holding below? In this case, you'll see this volume shelf, same thing, initially acted as a supply zone. Once we got through this after about 3 days of kind of chopping through that supply, look what happened. This is actually a great case study on the volume gap. There was no liquidity above. There was no one holding until we got up here. So imagine that you got in AMC at 13, 14 bucks on the pump, and then you finally get back to this price level on AMC. You're probably going to at least take some off the table, or maybe your whole position, depending on whatever your portfolio looks like. And that's exactly why this area has acted as a supply zone 4 days in a row now, because it has to digest all that supply from these people who are likely taking some off the table or completely getting out because now they're back to break even. So if you are interested in economics and supply and demand, this volume by price and just the ability to easily move this and anchor it from wherever you want to look will definitely help you visualize these areas a lot better. So I think that's all the time we have. AMC was a good one to end it on. And, thank you guys, as always, for having me on. Looking forward to next week's stream. I think we're doing it on Monday.
Yep. Going forward, starting next week, this will be a Monday show. But you all wouldn't know that anyway, because I would have announced it several times between now and then. So Jake Wujastyk, guys, is the co-founder of TrendSpider. Link is in the description of the video. You know what? I know it can be hard to click. It can be hard to find that. So I'm going to put the code up on the screen right there. BZ25 is the code. And if you need me to spell it out for you, I'll do it right now. TrendSpider.com. There is the link to the website. And we had the promo code up there. BZ25.
Yep,
Jake Wujastyk. Always a pleasure, sir.
25% off any plan with that code. So if you guys have any questions, you know where to find us at TrendSpider on Twitter. Spencer, we'll talk to you soon, my friend. Thank you so much.
Right there. Right there. See you, Jake. Right there. Right there. Okay. That's a wrap for me. No money Mitch today. Obviously, the dude's got like a mouth, a head full of painkillers. Half his face is numb. So he'll be back tomorrow. Trading Nomadic is our next show on at 7 o'clock. So we got an hour between now and then. Everyone go catch some dinner or something. And we'll see you back here for Trading Nomadic. And if you're still trading in the after hours session, I hope it's going well for you. And if I don't see you, catch you tomorrow morning. Remember, tomorrow morning, pre-market prep, 9 a.m., myself and Chris Kachi interviewing the CEO of Jumia, JMIA. That is tomorrow at 9 a.m. Tune in to that. Everyone have a good rest of your night. If I don't see you later on, I will see you tomorrow morning.